Alrighty, it's 6 p.m. I have started the recording, and we'll call the meeting to order for Thursday, April 22nd. I'd like to start with a roll call. Mr. Holmberg.
Present.
Mr. Taché. Dick, I can see your name. Are you able to unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
It worked.
I have so much trouble with this. I am so sorry.
I know. I
apologize.
always try and send you the unmute button, so I'm glad you got it this time. That feels like a big win. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Mr. Boudreau. He had emailed saying that he would be unable to make it, so I don't believe he'll be in attendance tonight. Mr. Woody.
Present.
Mr. Mogul.
Present.
Mr. Dombrowski.
Present.
First, the third item on the agenda, I guess.
And just for the record, I believe the planner, Liz Burdick, is also on the line.
Yes,
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Burdick. The next item on the agenda is citizen comments. As usual, I ask for you to keep them brief because we have a lot that we need to discuss this evening. Does anyone have a comment?
No.
Ms. Parkinson?
Allison, I would like to comment.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Rosemary Garska. I live at 10 Pleasant View. I own Heritage Hill Farm. Hello, Chairwoman Allison and committee members. Nice evening out there. Allison, no disrespect to you, but the ad hoc committee is not represented by a livestock farmer. Working on a farm, i.e. farmhand, is not the same as owning your own farm. According to the Merriam-Webster.
Ms. Garska, I'm going to
Yes.
interrupt you here and just remind everyone that Town Council appointed all members that serve on this committee. We're not a club. We've all been appointed by the Town Council to serve. And I also would like to say that I don't need to justify my farm experience at every meeting. I have 15 years of farm experience. I own a livestock farm. I raise chickens and pigs and bees. This isn't an important matter of public comment. Whether or not I'm qualified to serve is something that you can bring up with Town Council. It's not appropriate for our discussion tonight, and I'm not going to entertain that discussion. If you have specifics about the regulations or about my actions, like I'm happy to listen to those, but I have justified my experience at every meeting, and I don't wish to discuss it again tonight.
Okay, I understand that, but one thing to say is that a livestock farmer is a 24/7 farmer, not a farmhand. I would also hope that ample notice is going to be given to the alleged residents before these new regulations are instituted, so we don't run into these problems again.
So let me speak to that, because this is again process that we've discussed before, and so this committee will hand off its recommendations to the Town Council, who will hand to the Planning and Zoning Commission, who will follow the process that we are statutorily obligated to follow to make a regulation amendment, and that will include properly noticed public hearings at that point. And so I think it's important to remember that process has to happen after all the work of this committee. That process still has to happen through the Planning and Zoning Commission, where we are obligated and will follow all of the statutes that we must for public input. And so that's really outside of this committee.
Okay, I totally understand that, but residents that are listening and watching, I want them to also understand it in case they don't. Also, in hindsight, it may have been better to have a livestock farmer from the community in place of a member from planning and zoning. Thank you and have a nice night. And thank you, Allison, for listening to what I had to say about a 24/7 farmer, not a farmhand. Good night.
Any other citizen comments?
Yes, myself, hello? Can you recognize me, Karen Parkinson?
Yes, Mrs. Parkinson?
Okay, I submitted something in writing. I just have one little quick comment. This is Karen Parkinson from 55 Rose Hill Road in Ledyard. I'm a 40-year horse farm owner. I've read and you have read, and this sort of follows up what Rosemary says, but not any attack on you, Allison. You have read and heard my continued efforts for you to hear the livestock community without success. Therefore, I am making another effort by offering to take a minimum of 2, but all of you, if you wish, on a personal guided tour of several livestock, horse and cow farms in Ledyard. You can see several different levels of operation and speak directly to owners and operators. I can be available most anytime. Your willingness to participate will be recognized as an effort to fulfill your obligation and civic duty as members of this committee. My cell is 860-464-1559. Please write this down, 860-464-1559. And I also wish to support Paul Moggle's AHD concept. I think it has great worth. Thank you.
Any other citizen comments?
This is Eric Treaster. I'd like to address the committee.
Yes, Mr. Treaster.
Thank you. By the way, I want to express my appreciation for allowing the public to comment during your meetings. You don't have to do that, and I truly appreciate it. Good evening. My name is Eric Treaster. I live at 10 Huntington Way, and I've lived in Ledyard since 1976. In my opinion, the purpose of the efforts to regulate farms and the accessory uses of farms as a land use is not clear. In addition, it appears the direction of the committee, it appears that the direction the committee is going may result in regulations that are not consistent with the farming goals in the POCD. They may harm some farmers, and most importantly, they may not be compliant with Connecticut General Statutes 8-2, which is the enabling statute for the regulation of land uses in Connecticut. Zoning in Ledyard became effective on October 11th, 1963, and obviously farms and the accessory uses of farms existed before the original 1963 regulations were adopted. The first set of zoning regulations allowed farming and the accessory uses of farms as a by right use in R40 districts. At that time, the only residential districts were R20 and R40, with most of Ledyard zoned R40. Later, much of Ledyard was rezoned from R40 to R60 or from R40 to R80, and rezoned again when R80 districts reverted to R40 and R60 districts. The zoning regulations were eventually amended such that they currently allow farming and the accessory uses of farms by right in all residential and non-residential districts. In my opinion, there appears to be confusion between section 3.5A-4 of the zoning regulations, which states that, quote, any use not listed or otherwise permitted in a district is prohibited, which is a standard entry in zoning regulations, and the entry in the section 3.5 use table that states that accessory structures are allowed by right in all districts, which is also a standard entry in most zoning regulations. The term accessory structures is not defined in the zoning regulations, but the term accessory buildings and accessory uses are defined. They are defined in section 2.2 of the regulations as, quote, a use, building, structure, and or portion thereof, customarily incidental and subordinate to the principal use of the land or building and located on the same lot as the principal use, unquote. These two provisions generate important questions. For example, weddings are a use of land, but under the zoning regulations, are weddings allowed in Ledyard as an accessory use, which is allowed by right, or are weddings not allowed because the use is not addressed in the zoning regulations? Similarly, are hayrides and public apple picking allowed or prohibited in Ledyard? They are not listed as allowed uses, but are they accessory uses allowed by right under the regulations? In my opinion, the zoning enforcement officer would never issue a cease and desist order to a church for holding weddings, because it is obvious that weddings are an accessory use of the religious use that is listed in the use table, and accessory uses are allowed in our regulations by right. Similarly, in my opinion, weddings, hayrides, and public apple picking are lawful accessory uses of farms and are also allowed by right in the current regulations. If my assessment is correct, and the Planning and Zoning Commission proceeds to adopt regulations that will subject weddings, hayrides, and public apple picking on farms to regulations, those regulations will not be applicable because weddings, hayrides, and public apple picking would become pre-existing, lawful, protected, non-conforming uses. Any such new regulations would only be applicable to future farms, which may not be worth the effort. But if I am wrong, and weddings, hayrides, and public apple picking are not accessory uses of farms, then the zoning enforcement officer should immediately issue cease and desist orders. This would allow an appeal to be filed and the Zoning Board of Appeals to make a final determination if weddings, hayrides, and public apple picking are or are not accessory uses of farms. In my opinion, the answer is obvious. There's also the situation where, even if they are not accessory uses under the current regulations, if weddings, hayrides, and public apple picking took place on farms before 1963, when zoning was first adopted, then such uses would continue to be lawful, pre-existing, protected uses and would not be subject to the proposed new regulations. On a second subject, as you know, I entered into the record a highlighted copy of Connecticut General Statutes 8-2, which is the enabling statute for land use regulation. The reason I did this is because I believe it is important for committees who draft regulations to be knowledgeable of the statutory constraints on those regulations. In my opinion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recently adopted regulations for town fairs, circuses, and festivals, which imposed non-bulk requirements such as hours and days of operation in a manner that directly conflicts with the enabling statute for by right uses. In my opinion, under the enabling statute, town fairs and circuses are land uses that should only be allowed by a special exception permit. I believe this committee may be in the process of following a similar path by intending to allow accessory uses of farming by right, such as weddings, public apple picking, and hayrides, but at the same time impose limits on the hours and days of operation and on the number of customers. The enabling statute does not allow for non-bulk requirements, such as limits on the hours and days of operation or the number of customers, to be imposed on uses that are allowed by right. I urge everyone to consider the enabling statute as you draft regulations for farming and for the accessory uses of farms. I appreciate your patience in listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treaster. Any other comments?
Hello.
I'm
Yes,
having trouble
not about Mr. Treaster's. Are we looking for Mr. Treaster's response?
No, we're not responding. I'm just seeing if there are any additional citizen comments.
I submitted a proposal for an agricultural heritage district.
Hey, Paul, can I make a suggestion?
Well, of course you can, Nate.
So I think we shouldn't discuss that stuff that you sent under citizens' comments. So just as a committee member, right, you're allowed to bring stuff in that we can discuss, as a committee in regular order. So my suggestion would be that the committee amend our agenda to discuss the agricultural heritage district at the top of old business, so that we can just talk about that regularly instead of citizens' comments. Is that reasonable?
You're the-
Just a reminder, you can only amend the agenda under new business.
on the new business, right?
Sure. Sorry about that. Thanks, Kevin.
That's fine. On the new business, so let's do it there.
Yeah, and so just in general, if people could, we had several guilty parties today. If you're going to submit testimony for the commission, please get it in 24 hours ahead of time, just so everybody's got a chance to go through it. And so staff's got a chance to make sure that it gets filed appropriately. So we want to talk about it. We just want to make sure everyone has a chance to read it. So sorry about that. Thank you. Sorry, Chairman.
Okay, so everyone's fine if we add under new business, a discussion.
Allison, until we hit new business, we can't add it. So once you complete old business and then we go to new business, that's when you can add it in the agenda.
I'm just going to secretly and quietly make a note of nothing then. Does anyone else have a citizen comment? Hearing none, I'd like to move on to review and approval of the prior meeting minutes. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March 25th?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of March 25th, 2021.
Kevin Nabrowski seconds.
Are there any modifications or changes? All in favor of approval of the minutes as written?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing no one, we will approve the minutes as written and move on to old business. Starting with some of the questions that we had at the last meeting. The first question that we had was in regards to establishing a new agricultural principle use as defined in 2.2. The committee had been wondering what this would look like in practice. I did my best to summarize some of the hypothetical situations we had walked through, and I sent an email to Kyle Felice on 3/26 and didn't hear a response. So that's that. We had also had a question in regards to, Mr. Mogul.
Would you,
It's hard for me to see everyone tonight because there's more people than normal.
just that 326 email, I didn't see it. Could you read it to me or put it in the file here by reading it in? It would be very helpful. Thank you.
I'd rather not because it's attached to the agenda. Unless people feel differently.
Understand.
Okay. The second question that we had was who the director of health would be if there were issues with sanitation, particularly talking
And
about.
That would be Ledge Light.
Yeah, so we had emailed Liz Burdick and she forwarded Steve Mansfield's information. Mr. Dombrowski, at the last meeting, we were wondering if, not so much as like who the person at Ledge Light was, but like if that was the best person for dealing with some of these situations.
That would be in the town of Ledyard, that would be the only organization that would deal with those, since they are our health district.
Right.
We no longer have our own sanitation director. We used to years ago, but now that we're aligned with the Ledge Light, they handle all of that for us.
Hey, Kevin. So do you know, is there, does Ledge Light for other towns in the health district, do they handle this type of thing ever?
I I'm sure if a neighbor in a budding property made a complaint that it wasn't, that they would address it, yeah. I've never heard of it in town personally.
Yeah, I think that's why we were,
Yeah,
some of the like hypotheticals that I'd emailed, would be like, if my neighbor's cattle repeatedly were escaping and causing damage to my property, or if my neighbor's compost pile was producing an extreme odor or excessive number of flies, like, is that a situation that Ledgelight
not
would
something
be
I've never, in Ledgelight, if
equipped?
an animal getting lost, getting off the property wouldn't be handled by Ledgelight. That would be the animal warden or the police.
Ledgelight would handle more like their septic system. Does it comply with a sufficient number of, you're saying you got 100 people in your facility, but your septic system is only set up for 2 people. So it really that's what their assessment is about.
Correct.
And they're also established whether you're a class 1 food service establishment or a class 5 or class 3, based on your kitchen and your abilities and your background and your training. So these are things, and even your water temperature, and then they test your water 5 times a year. I experienced this myself. Thank you.
But as far as animal waste is concerned, and proper disposal and removal off the property, yeah, that would be handled through Ledgelight on what the proper, or the farmer could go talk to Ledgelight to say, what is the appropriate, how could I handle it? What do you recommend? That kind of thing. And they will be helpful.
Hi, may I speak, please? This is Liz Burdick.
Yes, Ms. Burdick.
So Ledgelight Health District investigates any public health code violations or any public health code regulations. So, if there are regulations in place regarding animal waste, then they would investigate.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then the last, we had needed a reference to site plans. Well, it's chapter 6, starting on page 36 was the answer to that question. And then the 4th thing, there was discussion of the right to farm at the last meeting, and so I included that as well from the state statutes. Again, the right to farm is really designed to protect farmers from nuisance complaints, particularly associated with odor, noise, dust, chemicals, water, that are directly related to a farm operation. It does not allow anyone the right to farm. So, I just included that so that we could be reminded of that statute as we continue our discussions. Does anyone have anything else from last meeting?
I think that covers the things that I remember us highlighting.
Yeah, Allison, I just add that so that, especially the right to farm, I brought that up, and I was definitely conflating terms, and I think what I was messing up was, isn't that farming as a right, not the right to farm, which Mr. Treaster mentioned during citizens' comments that there might be some precedent there. I have kind of asked around town since the last meeting. The example that was cited as, do you need a permit to begin to farm or to change uses from, let's say, a woodlot to a farm? And there's not a lot of support in the farming community that I talk to for a permit to have to go through planning and zoning to begin farming operations. Generally understood that is a right of the land. Whether that's correct or not, I mean, it's the work of this committee. But that was something that really stuck with me from last meeting. I don't think we should need a permit to begin farming on any parcel. It seems like that should be a right of the land. I don't know how to square that as we move forward, but definitely whether that's state statute or not, I think we still need to kind of square that. That's really open in my mind's eye. Just wanted to get that in there because that was one of kind of like things hanging.
I'm just adding the page number there to answer that question. So do we want to leave it written as the director of health, or should it be clarified to say Ledge-Lite Health District?
Well, the Ledge-Lite Health District is who we outsource to at the present time. Why not just say the director of health as per the town council, as determined by the city of the town of Ledyard? That would be the better way, perhaps. It's a more broader point of view.
Yeah, I agree. It seems safe.
Okay. And then the establishment of a new agricultural principal use as defined in 2.2.
It's up to the committee, but I'm going to stand pretty firm that I very firmly don't think I don't think you should need a zoning permit to begin farming on a parcel.
And I'm gonna actually back up Russ on that, in my opinion, too. If you have in your, as Mr. Treacer had stated in the comments, if we have that farming is allowed as a right to use on any parcel in town, then we don't need to have an agricultural use defined as a principal use.
Any objections to striking it then?
No objections.
It's fine.
Alrighty then. We had left off in March here at farm accessory dwelling units. You know, one of my first notes was a legally existing farm. I think it can just say a farm.
Yeah, I think that's fine if you're looking for input. And I think the thing that just in general that we need to think about here is this is really written, you know, as this is written as a accessory apartment, right? So this allows an accessory apartment, which I think, you know, and I want to hear from Mr. Holmberg there, is probably insufficient for the use that he wants. Is that correct?
Take a minute to unmute. I don't, so maybe, what are you getting at, Nate?
Oh yeah, sorry. So what I was getting at here is if you, this is really designed for, you know, the way it's written, because it refers to section 8.1, this refers to a relatively small accessory apartment that would probably only provide, you know, for a small apartment. So, you know, 1 or 2 bedrooms. And so I'm wondering if that's too small in scope for the uses that you would want to use this for.
Okay, I got you. Here, look, not to wander too far back into history here, but so that everybody understands how accessory farm dwelling uses are used at our farm. Back in the early 80s, we began and continue to be involved with a seasonal labor program instituted by the Department of Labor called H-2A. That's the Agricultural Labor Program that gives seasonal visas for people to come from usually South American countries or Central American countries and work on your farm for a season. Many farms use this program. As part of that program, you have to have seasonal housing for your seasonal labor. It is required and state inspected every year. When my father was about my age and became involved in this program, he went to planning and zoning. And he said, hey, we need to have some sort of zoning so that I can get this. At the time, planning and zoning said, we can do that. And I can't believe they did this, but they're like, we're going to require that it be a house trailer. That's what we want you to have. And they wrote the zoning regulations. I still have a copy of them somewhere. And it was for this use. It was a seasonal dwelling. And I think it was broken down by like labors per acre or something like that. I might be wrong on that, but it definitely said mobile home. And it had to be, you had to prove that you were a farm by submitting like financial documents. And then you were granted this, and it was renewed once a year. That remained in place until I think 2010 or so, when there was a rewrite of the zoning regulations, and it had been kind of moved around and whittled, and then it disappeared in the rewrite. And the zoning officer at the time noticed that, and he came out and he said, hey, I used to have to do this every year. It's gone. You're grandfathered in. And he gave us a certificate of zoning compliance for that structure. And he's just like, you're grandfathered in. You've been doing this forever. We took it away. Nobody told you. There you go. So we were just kind of like, okie dokie. So we have that is one half of it. The other half of it was sometime along the line, and maybe this is what you're getting at, Nate. So I don't even know if that's the program you were asking about. Because for a farm, like a lot of farms, it's not uncommon to have 10, 15 people seasonally coming up. That's not how many people we have. We have 3. But that is a really, really important use for farms. And that is absolutely would be like a bunkhouse style housing. Additionally, beyond that, there used to be you could build a house for up to probably, I think, per 50 acres for a caretaker of the farm. That also came into the regs and then went away. And so we're trying to kind of square those, where we're like, as far as the H2A housing, we feel confident. I mean, we have a certification of compliance. This would certainly cover something like H2A housing for sure. But it also kind of precluded that house option. I don't really know if that's what you're getting at, Nate. It seemed like the house option would be good too. This kind of splits the difference in the middle of the road. I know that was a lot of explaining, but that's the whole picture here at Holmberg Orchards.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Is, I know there have been changes in those regulations and things have dropped out, and the intent here is, look, we want to make sure that we cover those. And my concern was, looking at this definition, that it probably doesn't cover all of those cases. And so that was my worry, is that, we may, and this may be something to hand to staff, to research, look, what's the right thing to say here, so that we make sure that we cover both, sort of caretaker housing, as well as seasonal workforce, so that whatever we do here covers both. Because that's the only concern. I don't think there's any concern about making sure it's in here. It's just making sure we get the words right, so that we cover all of those cases without leaving something out like we have in the past.
And if I may, we did have, and Russ was right, back in like 2010, we actually had amended the zoning regs to add in seasonal workforce housing on, and it may be beneficial to see if we can find those old regs to see what that language was, to see if we could use that as a starting point to see if that's what we want to go do. I'm not saying the acreage amount or anything like that, but at least those words as a starting point.
Yeah, my father quite proudly has a file with all of the the zoning as it passed, and his certification of compliance and the appropriate sections highlighted from back when, like I said, he was about my age and got the thing worked through to allow that. I know I was surprised, and one of the things is we've been trying to get our arms around with is what's a farm and how in order to qualify for something kind of above and beyond a farm. Now you want a farm with seasonal housing. There was a requirement at the time to prove you were a farm. And I think it went through the tax assessor's office, but I'll happily, I don't know I'll happily send you what I have. I don't know the best way to get that to everybody else from what it was. I mean, that.
If you wanna, I'll add that to our, that'll be number 1 on our research document.
Sure.
And you wanna ask Rick to send it directly to me, or you just wanna
Yeah, I'll scan it and send it over to you. The stuff I have is from like, I couldn't find, quick search, the stuff that kind of came, it was like the early aughts. I know there was a horse farm that was looking for a house, and it was, at the time, it was like a house per 50 acres. Does that sound right?
Yeah, no, that's what it was. It was a minimum of 50-acre lot that could build a structure, not trailers, but actually
Yeah,
building a
yeah.
structure for workforce housing.
Yeah, that's the one I remember too. And I know we went looking for it a couple of years ago and realized it had dropped out at some
Right.
point. So
Yeah.
I remember 50 acres too.
Yeah, because I remember that. I was on the zoning commission at the time when we adopted that amendment.
Right. Right. I think there's only one or two people that took advantage of it. And I was like, oh, it's just kind of sitting there latent, and then it's not there anymore. And I'm like, it's all of a sudden you spin around and you're like, well, jeepers, we don't have the H2A thing. We don't have what happened here? So
I'm probably what happened is during the reg rewrites, it was pretty much one or two farms took advantage of it, and then nobody else came forward, and it was removed, and those that had it were, grandfathered in, so to say, or, pre-existing non-conforming.
All right, so do we want to table this section for this conversation for the next meeting?
Yeah, because in my opinion, I think you need two, Nate, and see if you agree with me on this one. One that would be this for smaller farms for caretaker facilities, and then one for larger farms that require seasonal work.
Yeah, I think that works because I mean we've had specific requests for essentially an accessory apartment, in a detached garage for horse farms or something that they want either a full-time or part-time caretaker. So we've certainly had this request, and it may be easier just to have this that covers that case, and then something else that covers the seasonal workforce better rather than trying to smush it into one. So I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I will say that, I don't think that 10 or more acres necessarily is the magic number here, because the intensity of the agricultural activity is really what determines the number of employees on a farm. And what else had I written down? Oh, that sometimes having it only available for an individual, like we have a lot of families or couples that work here, or just work on farms in general, and so being careful not to unnecessarily limit that.
I mean, that's a simple change in that point there, Alice, in my opinion, is the individual responsible for caretaking, just add and their families.
Yeah, I mean, if people are fine with that, I can add that in now. And I guess the other thing is like actively used for a farming activity brings up the question of, what happens if a farm is fallow for 4 or 5 years or whatever, what happens to the structure?
So the question is that there wouldn't be anything that would happen to the structure, but the question is whether or not you're allowing what would effectively be a second residence on a parcel that's no longer a farm.
But if the farm is, so we have an apartment on our farm. So if it were zoned as a farm accessory dwelling unit, and the farm became inactive for a number of years, we would not be permitted to have occupancy of that dwelling unit, but the structure would remain.
Yeah, that's how it's written now, right? I mean, nothing happens to the structure. Absolutely. Yeah. It's just a structure, and whether it's being used, as a residence is a sort of a separate piece to the existence of the building.
Okay.
Allison, it's always been when we had that 50-acre thing, we were kind of scratching our heads where we're like, well, if we've got 50 acres that we're using and 150 total, can we put up 3 structures on that? Like, not that we would, but it's just definitely like a head scratcher. And I think that question might have kind of started to get at that point, that you don't wind up with a loophole to subdivision, or kind of condoing out, I guess would probably be a more apt description of what you do, where you had a landowner with all these kind of rentals popped up. I think that's what that's getting at. Might not be the best term for it, but as a member of the community, I think something there to say it's got to be an actual farm is warranted. I don't think it's unnecessary.
Right, and how to appropriately size it, because if you need 3 H2A workers for your 150 acre farm, but I can imagine, I've worked on much smaller farms with much larger H2A crews.
Well, and I think the other thing to remember too, I'm sorry, I didn't, if I cut you off, I apologize.
Nope, go for it.
Oh, so I was going to say, the other thing to remember is that, the things around the numbers, are really easy to fix. And if it turns out that, we've undershot this at some point, right, changing a regulation so that, it's not 50 acres, it's 25 acres is really easy. As long as we've got, the pieces of this is what we're allowing, I think that it's easy to deal with, so that if we undershoot or overshoot something like that, we can correct.
Well, that's difficult to see.
And to your point about the 10 acres, while I don't necessarily disagree that that's may not be the correct number, we have to figure out what would be the right, if you're not going to use acreage, if you're going to use intensification of use of the farm, somehow you'd have to quantify that number to say what is the right size or use, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, the 10 acres comes from, the people who have come to the commission asking for an ADU associated with horse farms and stuff like that. That this is, works for them. That's the only place this comes from. So.
Yeah, I don't really have another suggestion. We don't have any H2A workers at the moment. We have 5 local employees, which, would probably equal to 2 H2A workers. But our farm is very intensively managed. All right, let's move. Russell, you'll send me over some of the history that you're able to dig up, and it'll be easier to hash out, hopefully, two distinct accessory dwelling definitions at our next meeting, once we have that information. Unless anyone has another comment.
No, my only comment is that, like I said, there was another set of regulations that were adopted that didn't specify trailers, in which case where Russ is talking about. And I wonder if Liz could go search for that. And that would have been the regulations back about 2009, 2010 timeframe that had you could actually build a structure to support that.
Will do.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'll be good to learn more about the history of that, and then make some decisions at the next meeting. Non-agriculturally related uses. So this is, activities that are part of an agricultural operation's overall offerings, but are not incidental to agriculture, tied to agricultural buildings, structures, equipment, or fields. Should this be a definition?
So I might just simplify this and just call this recreational uses, because I think that's really what these are.
Up here?
No, for the thing that you just had highlighted.
Okay.
right? So that's a really long sentence. The only things that I know of that fit in this category are, essentially recreational uses of the land.
Why are you limiting it to 10 or more vehicles? So is that, for example, on the trail down by the Preston Park there, we'll have 20 to 30 cars on a Saturday, for example. I mean, maybe there's a need for not limiting that at this point in time. Just a thought.
So the parking there is Preston Park, right? That's not for a farm.
It's across the street from
No,
Preston.
no, it's on the old State Farm property. That's what Paul's talking about, is that although the people who walk the current Tri-Town trailer that exists, some will park in the Preston Plains Park, but there's also cleared parking on town property on the old State Farm property, right on the Preston line.
Yeah, you'll have up to 20, 30 cars there at a time. And then there'll be people across the street in the Preston Park, which is paved. So you'll have quite a few people on that trail at any on a weekend if it's very nice.
But on a different note, I'll say that that property is not being used as a farm. So
Does this line, does the fact that it's free mean that it doesn't count? Because this specifically says fee-based outdoor recreation.
remember, this is, don't confuse what the Tri-Town Trail is doing with what this is for, what non-agricultural uses you can use on the property. So I think that's a separation you got to make right there.
I guess my question is, and this is something we would do, like, we have this conversation with our insurance underwriter all the time. If we have 10 people out to the farm for a paid snowshoeing event, that's insured differently than if we invite 10 people out to the farm for a free snowshoeing tour, and is that distinguished here?
So I think from a zoning point of view, there's no difference.
So why is fee-based specifically?
Well, that right before that, it says may include but not limited to, right? So I think you can get rid of that if you would like, but the thing right before it says this is an example of not limited to that, right? So my only comment is, I think from zoning, the thing that you care about is that you have safe parking, and that there's a way for people to get from where they're parking to wherever they're going, and are less concerned about how much people are paying to be on the property.
I think if it doesn't matter, then it makes it easier to understand if it's not there.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think
Because then where would like 4-H and FFA meetings fall in this category, which is historically, something that happens on farms. It's not necessarily fee-based.
I would think those would be small events, actually. Right, if you're talking about a meeting.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can agree with you. I'm not sure I can agree with you, but I'm just trying to navigate.
Yeah, no,
navigate the wording is what I'm,
Yeah, but if you use an example of an FAA meeting, that by all means is an agricultural use, right? By definition. You're the
Future Farmers of America meeting.
Yeah.
In my mind, is an agricultural.
That's agricultural based because you're doing agricultural training. So that wouldn't be a non-agricultural related use.
Okay.
That's true. I think the better example would be the Boy Scout meeting or something like that. It's a good point, Kevin.
But I do agree. You can strike the fee base because it really, in this case, I don't think it matters whether it's fee based or if it's free.
Include, but are not limited to outdoor recreation.
And to Nate's point, the 10 parking places is just saying that you have sufficient parking available for those who would be using the property, and that they're not blocking traffic. If it's on a smaller, if your farm happens to be on a smaller, narrower road and you're and you're blocking access for emergency vehicles and stuff like that. That's really, I think, from a zoning standpoint, that's what you're trying to avoid.
Is there a way that we can say that without picking this number 10? You know, and just if there needs to be adequate parking.
Allison, I'm scanning through. I got like 3 screens going here. Joe Nichols had sent me some stuff about the winery regulations, and there was some other towns that handled that question a little more folksy. It basically said the same thing. What we're all saying is you got to have enough cars, or enough parking for the cars. But I think it was Colchester that was just like, it can be in a field, like it said that, like as long as they're not on the road. If you just want to put an asterisk there, I'll try to pull out those things, and we could probably have for next meeting, wherever that comes up, 3 or 4 different choices of wording there, and we can all throw darts at it and pick one. But they all basically say the same thing without the 10. I mean, I think 1 or 2 of them had 10.
To the point, really what you're trying to do, you're not looking to say I have 10 paved parking spots or 10 lined out parking spots. That's just you're providing enough adequate parking on site so that they're not impeding traffic. So they use an example right now that they're going through is that the neighbors are all starting to complain about, like down in Stonington with the cider mill, where they get busy on the weekend, then there's no park, the vehicles really can't pass by each other on that road because everybody's parking on the street because there's not enough park. And I know the town is struggling with trying to figure out how to deal with that.
This is the Colchester document that you had sent me, Russell. To ensure public safety, farm stores, which are required to have off-street parking that's code compliant as it relates to grade and drainage, a parking area of 3 square feet for every 1 square foot of building or outdoor display area should be provided. Paved parking is not required. Permeable surfaces are encouraged. Is that what you were thinking? I can't.
Rush.
Thanks, Kev. I think was one. There's 5 or 6 in there. They all address parking. It was a theme. Like, you guys, yeah, there you go. Like some more kind of along the same lines. Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. A section of a field works, presuming it's passable. Pretty easily understood.
So it says seasonal farm stands are required to provide parking for 5 cars. I was hoping we could be a little more broad.
I mean, I think, from the zoning point of view and from the ZEO's job, it's easier when there's a number, right? And so, when there's a number and he goes out and there's 18 cars, it's easy for him to say, okay, look, we need to get a site plan in place. And when there's no number at all, it makes his life a little bit more painful, to say, okay, well, what do I do here? I think, we can try to finesse this to some extent. I'm just not sure how much we accomplish.
Like 10 or more vehicles at a time in a day. What if you are hosting an event that you're unsure of how to estimate attendance? If it's open to the public and you're doing it for the first time and you don't know.
Well, I think that's why it says reasonably to be expected, right? And this is set up, right, to essentially allow very easy access to doing this the first couple of times without having a site plan. And if you do this twice and you end up with 20 or 30 cars there at any one time, then okay, you've exceeded this and you need to go and get a site plan in place. But it's kind of set up to try to allow that carve out that you just sort of cited, which is this is the first time I've done it. I don't really know. Well, then fine. Then that's why it says just do it by zoning permit. And when you get a bunch of people out there and you have the knowledge that you're going to exceed that, then you need to get a site plan in place.
Okay. Anything else for recreational uses? Small events venue for uses such as, but not limited to, retreats, workshops, classes are permitted by site plan review for the commission, but no outdoor events or amplified music are permitted, and the event shall be limited to less than 10 motor vehicles.
That's very too small to be even profitable. I mean, why would anyone do something like that? It doesn't make sense. Sorry, I just,
Sorry, so why would someone hold workshops? Or
no, why would someone have a small event like that? Workshop would be nice, but you're going to have 50 to 100 people there if it's a workshop. You don't really generally have 10 people.
Host small scale.
Good luck with that, but
and things all the time. I mean, we don't, but I could certainly imagine having 10 to 12 people out for an interactive workshop or a class on our farm. I guess I don't understand why a site plan review.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's, if you're going to have a spontaneous meeting of 10 to 20 people, why would you have to go and get zoning permit? It costs $560 to go before all this. Come on, this is just too much. This is what happened to spontaneity. I can see if you're going to have 100 people or something like this, that maybe you need to have something in the regs about that. But other than that, I don't see the reason. There's certainly parking off street is an issue, lights, noise, of course.
Yeah, so I actually agree. So I think that since this is limited to less than 10 motor vehicles, I think you can probably make the argument that it fits with the stuff above to say that this can be done by zoning permit. I think that kind of follows.
Do we actually need a zoning permit for a spontaneous meeting? I mean, that's a bit much, don't you agree? I mean, if you had 10 people over in the evening to watch a football game or whatever it is sports you like, would that be a problem? Would you need a permit for that?
But it's not a spontaneous meeting, right? This is something that you are setting up, and you are either renting your facility for this use, or you are hosting these for a part of your business on a regular occurrence. You know, yeah, people have parties all the time where they have a bunch of cars, and when it happens once a year, it's a non-issue. But it's when you're doing this as a regular part of your business, I think, that you want to care a little bit about the public being there.
It really depends on your parking and what you're accustomed to doing, how you scale your business. This small venue, again, it doesn't seem to make sense. But go ahead. I don't see that that's very helpful at all.
I also have a question about the no outdoor events, as that seems to contradict a lot of what I would imagine taking place.
Yeah, I agree.
As part of a farm workshop, where we're picking tomatoes and then canning tomato sauce, or we're learning how to shear sheep and then dyeing wool. I don't know.
Totally agree.
That fits into farms other
I
than.
think the outdoor events could be stricken.
Totally agree.
So but no amplified music.
So on a suggestion, this is for uses such but not limited to retreats, workshop classes such as yoga, wood dyeing, etc., are permitted, but no amplified music are permitted, and the event should be limited to less than 10 motor vehicles.
So scratch this too.
I think you'd stop after the word permitted and erase the rest of it.
I disagree. You still have to handle the parking issue, Paul.
Agreed. But you didn't handle that up above. I mean, you've handled it in every section. So what?
Yep, you do, because they're different aspects of what you're doing.
Well, you have one parking lot for every 2 people or something like this at the event.
We can agree to disagree.
Fine, fine.
So as written currently with the strikeouts that I have, I could have a yoga class on my farm for 12 people, assuming several will carpool and not need a permit at all.
That's the way I read it, yes.
I could have yoga every day and not need for 10 people and not need a permit. Is that how everyone's reading it?
That's how I read it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I read it. And I would add the way my eyes read that, Allison, is if you had 11 cars on that Wednesday yoga, I don't, and everybody's off the street and everybody's well behaved, I don't imagine anybody's really going to have a problem with it any more than if you had 8 the day before. I really think the only problem is going to get when you start to get to 15 and 20 and they're parked on the street. So that's how I would interpret that. Like, and you know, not speaking for the town, but that'd be my read on that. Like, it's just kind of a bracket, and as long as you're kind of in that bracket, you'll probably be okay.
But to your point, Allison, if you have 4 people in a car, you have 10 cars, you could have 40 people every day for a yoga class. Way that wording is right now.
Right. So it's not,
Then
it doesn't necessarily limit the number of people. It's just vehicle based.
Correct.
And that doesn't include staff parking. Because let's be honest, I'm not teaching yoga.
What if they come in a bus from a hotel? You can get 20 people in a bus. I mean, can I park 10 buses? Yes.
If you can park 10 buses on a part that you put 10 cars in, sure.
It's a big field, Kevin, big field.
It's a lot of yoga. Large scale events.
I have one big comment.
Yep.
That final sentence.
Are we still on small events?
No, I'm on large scale events.
Okay.
That final sentence. Strike.
Yeah, the commission doesn't have authority to do that.
Well, number one, there's no ordinance in it. We do not have a noise ordinance in the town. So there is no way that this can be enforced. The only enforcement you would have for noise would be through state statute, and that would be handled through the police department. And the reason I say this is a number of years ago, we went through in the zoning regs trying to figure out how to do noise for a windmill, and 3 hours with 4 engineers all trying to figure out what weighted dB, non-weighted dB, what noise level is appropriate at what point and stuff like that. And also in dealing with trying to write a noise ordinance as well for the town, very difficult, very subjective. And the training that would be required to support this. So the town, right now, the town has no way to enforce this except excessive noise through what is through the current state statutes. And the only people who can enforce that is the police.
And it's worth noting that this is actually a case where the state statute is useful since you're talking about amplified music. Because in many of the cases, state statute doesn't apply. But this is a case where you would have the state statute where it becomes a police problem, which is the right way to handle this stuff anyways, if you actually have a problem here.
So the difference between a large scale events, I guess now that I'm reading it, like, I'm not sure venue is the right word. In my mind, like, a venue is a location, whereas we're really just talking about the actual event. Like, when we're talking about number of vehicles. But I digress. A small events venue. I guess I'm wondering if venue is the right word, because I could have a large scale events venue if I had a magical huge yoga studio, but I could host small events that wouldn't necessarily, with less than 10 motor vehicles, that wouldn't necessarily require.
Right, but the point, if you're a venue that can handle large scale events, then you by definition can handle small scale events as well. If you're a venue that can only handle small scale events, then you would not be able to do large scale.
Yeah, I saw my furrowed brows as you guys were talking about the small events, because I'm thinking through it, and I'm like, the issue isn't the small events, it's the small events at a small place and not large events at a small place. Like, my read on this, it was just like there probably has to be not so much parking spots, but maybe just actual size of the property. Because it would seem like a large scale events venue shouldn't be on something like 3 acres. That just seems intuitive to me. It seems like there should be something to say, if you're a small events venue, then, whatever it is, 5 or less acres. And if you're large scale, it seemed to be looking through other regs, at least 5 or 10 acres. It wasn't uncommon to see in other zoning regs. I don't know if anybody else has any comments on that.
It's very common. What you often see, I think it's Waterford that does 310 or 320. And so, for small events, you need 3. For the large events, you need 20 acres. So it's very common. In addition to being common, I think it does make sense for just what you say. In order to park 50 cars, right, you need a pretty big chunk of land just to do that. And so it certainly adds up.
But wouldn't that be part of the site plan review?
In this case here, yeah, site plan review would be required because it's a larger intensive use.
But I think we would want to include that standard directly in the regulation. It depends, right? It depends on what you want to allow the commission to do, right? So it's easy if you put an acreage threshold and say you must exceed this acreage threshold in order to even consider doing this. Otherwise, you throw it to the commission to decide whether or not they think that the parking plan that is proposed, is acceptable.
While I don't disagree, the other issue you have, if you have a 3 acre lot and have enough room for 50 cars to hold a large scale event, then you likely don't have enough room left on the farm to farm. So you would not fit the farm definition. So therefore this would fall out.
Not if you were parking on a hayfield. I feel like I could imagine seasonal land usage shared with
Yeah, I guess, okay.
temporary event space.
You could do that, but so I guess in that point, that's one of the reasons I'm not so sure putting the acreage is the right, because you could do things that are off season from the growing if you're using the field. But I'm not sure if you want to park in a farm field where you're actually actively farming in it and people drip contaminants from their motor vehicle on where you're trying to grow agriculture.
You could also probably extend that sentence where it says, in order to satisfy the conditions of the special permit, we might be able to extend that to essentially say that the commission could, limit the number of parking spots based on the site plan or something like that. Because look, if you've got enough room for 40 cars, then can you host a 40-person wedding? Maybe you can't host a 200-person wedding, but maybe that's okay. Maybe that's not what you're trying to do.
So what would be the standards and regulations to approve a large scale event? Let's say for a special permit. Suppose you had a 10 acre field and you can park 500 cars. And then you bring in buses, I don't know, land a helicopter, I don't know, whatever, you know, things happen.
What if you provided off-site parking with a shuttle service?
I did that one year. It worked really well. We used a school bus and we used a
Right.
bus.
How would that work in terms of approval for the events if you were able to?
I don't know. We didn't have a problem with it at all.
Yeah, so the regulations allow for the concept of shared parking. I'm not sure there's anything in the regulations that sort of would specifically address offsite parking.
It's not outside the realm of possibility for.
Oh no,
for
not at all. And
we have a large town parking lot across the street from our farm. Like, it would be within reason to provide shuttle service in Addison in order to have. I mean, we got married at the farm. I'm not saying we would ever want to do that again, but I'm just saying it's not outside.
Get married again?
I'm not getting married again. That can go on.
No, I get it. I'm just saying, I think the regulations don't say anything about it right now. I'm not aware of anything that they do to address that.
I guess that's why I'm not sure. Going back to like the word venue, you know.
Well, so in the case of, to make it to your point, Allison, for the venue, in that case, what you'd have to say is greater than 10 motor vehicles expected to require motor vehicles on-site parking. If you say on-site, now that makes you the large scale venue. I know it, you could, and to Paul's point, I could do a whole lot of different things and twist it the way I want, but do you really want to write the regulations in such a way that either one, it's too ambiguous, or number two, it's too detailed?
I guess more what I'm trying to navigate in my head is like, I don't think my parcel, for example, would ever be approved as a large scale events venue for a number of reasons. But primarily that we can't provide adequate parking for a large number of vehicles. However, could we apply for a special permit to have a large scale event if we were able to meet their requirements? We wouldn't be a large scale events venue. Could we have a large scale event?
So, I mean, I think that you could, and I think if we wanted to make it explicit, saying something about requiring a parking plan is acceptable, right? Because then a parking plan can include, look, here's the deal. We have an agreement with X that we've got 75 parking spots there, and we're going to run a shuttle from point A to point B. And so as long as you bring that parking plan that demonstrates that you can handle it, I would think it'd be something you could do.
So Nate, what would that look like?
Well, that would be part of this. I think where Nate is going with that is that would be part of the special permit application.
Yeah.
And the site plan is that you would show, here's what I'm planning on doing to be my large scale event venue, but my parking is going to take place over at X parcel. And here's my agreement that I have, my signed agreement with that owner. And I plan on using a shuttle service, and no parking would be on site, but that would be part of your special permit application. I think that's where Nate is going.
So it's not going here. It's not going in writing here that you have to show adequate parking. That would be something that the commission would just know to make an exception for.
You would be showing adequate parking by using a different parcel and providing your parking and how you're going to park. That's where Nate is going. So in the special application permit, you would be requesting to say, hey, I'm not going to do any parking on site with the exception of staff. And all of the guests that would be showing up would be parking over in this location, and a shuttle service will be provided for those individuals to get back and forth from the event. But if you put that into your special permit application stating that, then that's how the commission would then would approve or review that, I should say.
Now, this, you're looking at one permit at a time. What if you had large events on every week, 2 or 3 a week? Would you put an annual plan together for a permit?
Well, I think that's where the term venue comes in.
That's right. Exactly so. And it expands beyond just it is a farm, but can be a venue. In other words, there are both. And one assists the other to survive and grow and be effective. So again, it's not just one venue, one activity at a time. It's really more about a plan of action for an annual basis. I think that would be something we
Well,
should incorporate it here and
I-
look at more than just, Kevin, excuse me, Kevin, look at more than just one event at a time. It's too restraining. It doesn't work.
no, your point, I think you're missing the point, Paul. You're calling it a venue, and this is, it's not one event. This is not for one event. This is for a venue. So you're having this as a repeated, much like what your business does today. This is the repeated, it happens every Saturday. I have my wine tasting, but in this case here, nobody parks on site. People are parking off site somewhere else, and I am shuttling them so that there is no on-site parking. That is part of your venue plan.
Well, that's entirely doable, Kevin. Depends on where you
That's
are,
where I was,
how
that's
you
where I
how
was
you
going.
structure it. How you structure is everything.
No, and I agree, but I think that's the point. That's why the word venue is important here, because you're not talking about a single event. You're talking about running a venue on your farm that happens multiple times throughout the year. And you're putting in a special permit application to say, this is how I plan on running my venue. This is the building that's going to be used. This is where the facilities are going to be located. And my parking is going to be taken care of by doing this. That's part of your application. I think we're muddying the event versus the venue.
Can I comment? This is Liz Burdick, the town planner. To expand on what Kevin was saying, if you are, you're a farm and you come into the Planning and Zoning Commission with a special permit for a large event venue, that special permit site plan goes with the land. You don't have to come back for each event. Your approval would be for a large event venue, and you could have your venues. You could just have your events after your special use permit is approved and your site plan is approved. So you don't have to go for every single one. You would go for one application for a large event venue. And once that approved, that's what you are. You have a large events venue on your farm. Does that make sense to everybody?
Okay. But if
I'm-
you just wanted to have a large event, that would be a different permitting process.
Right,
Separate from becoming a
Well-
venue.
right. So if
If I wanted to have one wedding, I wouldn't need to go through the venue permitting process.
well, that's something that has to be addressed in this. Listening to all of this, it may have to be addressed for single events, like the temporary events that were, that might be approved down in the Gales Ferry. That might have to be looked at, because the way this is written for large scale events is for a venue. So if you wanted to have one event, that might be something we have to look at further in these regulations.
I guess I just don't, I see that like within the realm of possibility for,
Right.
you know, not to pick on Russell, but let's say he just did pick your own and then he wanted to have his spring farm market in May, like they usually do. And that was just one event that he did every year.
Right, but you could
Uh-huh.
get one application that encompasses all of the events that you're going to do. So as Kevin said earlier, if you have a large scale events venue, you could hold smaller events once a year on the property. So
How does it work if a homeowner wants to get married in their yard? They
Well-
need a site plan review.
they do not, because it's private property. They do if they put up a tent. That would be like having a party at your home. If they put up a tent, I believe they do need fire marshal approval. I'm not positive that they need building permit for the tent, but I'm pretty sure if you put up a tent, it has to be inspected by the fire marshal. But no, if you just wanted to have one wedding at your home, not a commercial wedding, not where you're gonna, you're renting out your property. If
Right.
it's your own property, you can have a party, a wedding on your own property. There's no site plan approval required for that, just a permit for the tent or an inspection for the tent.
Okay. To switch gears, just to keep things moving, is amplified speech allowed if I had a PA system to make announcements? Don't make me make up examples. It's like too late for that. But not music, but if we were having a meeting and I wanted to be really loud.
So look, I mean, practically this is all complaint based, right? And if you're having a meeting and you yell to corral kids a couple of times, whether you use a little bullhorn to do it or not, right? No one is going to care. The intent is certainly, yeah, look, if you're going to be giving speeches, amplified speeches for 3 hours every time you hold one of these events over a PA system, yeah, look, that's amplified.
I don't know where we're heading with the large events venue, but I'm just going to go back on the record. Everything that we've talked about, I'm still of the opinion that large events require large spaces. I'm sure there's a lot of workarounds on this, but I can tell you from personal experience, my wife and I were almost bought a property in another town, but they had just got approval for a large events space in a small venue with offsite parking. And we were like, sure, that we'll bring the check Monday. There's a wedding on Friday night. By Saturday morning, we were like, nope, no, thank you. As a member of the community, we were like, there's just not enough space for it. It's shoehorned in there and it's obnoxious to the abutters. As a property owner, boy, I'd love to do everything on anything on any lot, but as a member of the community, I don't know how it looks, but I really wholeheartedly think that large scale events need large scale places. It seems to be pretty standard issue in a lot of other zonings in town. I don't know if it's anything we're going to do, but I just want to go back on the record as saying that.
So your suggestion is to add a minimum acreage requirement to this?
Acreage or property line setbacks. I mean, I looking through the stuff for the weddings, it wasn't uncommon to see like 300 feet. So there's no acreage, but you got to be able to park the cars and have, if not 300 feet, some sort of like screening or something. I talked to a couple in Montville that just built a wedding venue, and I think that's how they resolved it. In Montville, they had to do, or maybe they might have been, actually, I think they might have been in Waterford, and there was some sort of a screening so that the neighbors can't see or hear. It seems.
Well, I think 20 acres is a good buffer as well. So 20 acres would be great. I mean, that's pretty standard in Stonington, is a 20 acre as a minimum for agricultural heritage district, for example. So that's a minimum 20 acres. I'd go with that.
I disagree. I mean, it's not just because I'm tiny, but we're talking about more than 10 vehicles. I think a property that's 5 acres could easily park 20 vehicles for a large scale events venue, especially if it wasn't something that happened regularly. If it was just something seasonal or not at night or not very loud. Like, I think there are lots of ways to have medium-ish, which isn't a category here, but I'm just trying to say not small, but also not a 200 person wedding with lots of drinking and loud amplified not speaking, and have neighbors be fine with it. I don't know if we need to restrict it with an acreage requirement.
Then to follow up, I think that kind of information based upon your site plan would vet that out through the commission.
Would the commission would a commission review for a permit like this have sign off from the neighbors?
I know that for amplified music or even unamplified music, you have to send out letters to your neighbors. The
So,
neighbors
but there's
usually
no
get your
approval.
claim, but there's no real
Yes.
approval by the state. And they won't issue a permit to you unless you get that approval from your neighbors. In other words, by getting the state permit, you've gone through that practice and gone out to your neighbors, and they have sent in either positive or negative responses to the state, and then you get your permit. Basically, that's how it's done up to this point in time.
That's
So-
only, Paul, that's only if there's alcohol involved, and that's only if you're the permittee. If you had a caterer's license, a caterer come in and do that, then the caterer would do that, and then that wouldn't apply.
And so just for clarification, for a special permit, right, you have to notify your neighbors that you have applied. But that's it. You know, it's essentially just notification that you are doing this so that they have a chance to come to the public hearing and complain. But they can't do anything other than show up at the public hearing and say, I don't like it. And so, you know, look, what I'm hearing a little bit is that, you know, this use may need some standards to help guide a site plan approval. And maybe it's a combination of things like screening. You know, it is certainly things that we do for other uses where, you know, we set up a set of things that like, look, these are the things that you need to show for the special permit. And so it sort of gives a guideline for the commission to, these are the things that you have to look at. And so, you know, there might be ways to kind of do that, to gather up some of these things to help minimize the impact.
So you're saying something like a buffer, for example, say it could be architectural, it could be something that isolates and separates you from your neighbors, whether it's visual or even a large stone wall, for example, that would stop that noise or odor or whatever it be. In other words, that's what you're trying to say is a buffer.
Yeah, so buffering can take, you know, a couple different forms. You know, in the regulations now for certain uses, you know, we have descriptions for, you know, a vegetative buffer, you know, and things like that. And so, you know, we could do some things like that, like specifying, you know, full cutoff downlighting to make sure that light isn't escaping from the site. You know, we could certainly specify setbacks, you know, and you can specify setbacks for, you know, certain types of things. So look, okay, you're allowed to have parking, you know, within X feet of the boundary, but wherever you're having, you know, dining or amplified music needs to be 300 feet from a property line. So, you know, the nice thing about setbacks is it does give you a little bit more freedom in your site plan design to kind of say, okay, this can actually work. I can put this over here, you know, which is not very intrusive, but closer to the neighbors. This part that is more intrusive, I can move to the other side of the property and it's very far from neighbors. So, you know, that could be one strategy to tackle it instead of just saying it's got to be X acres.
I guess that's what I was getting at with the 20 acres is that added buffer to the area. Now that could be done with other than just acreage, I'm sure.
My other question, and I do want to move on because it's getting late. But this is just for like non-agriculturally related events, correct? So like, where would pick your own fall?
Where would harvest fall? Where
Or-
would
Right.
wine?
So let's say I'm having a large scale
wine to table.
tomato picking party. I you know, even at just an acre and a half, if it was fully planted to tomatoes, it wouldn't be unreasonable to invite 20 motor vehicles to an event. And tomato season is lengthy, so it could be something that I did repeatedly. But that's not a non-agricultural related use. I mean, and I know like Mr. Treaster has brought up, you know, a number of these things being questionable as whether they're agriculturally related or not. you know, in some regards, like I would consider a canning class, if you're canning tomatoes grown on a farm, agriculturally related small event. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that. But
But doesn't the new town fair circus regs allow thousands of people on 10 acres on a year-round basis? I mean, if that is okay there, why wouldn't something similar to that be okay in other areas? There's a precedent established.
It's because that's a commercial district, right? It's a very different, it's a very limited district. And it's locations essentially adjacent to Route 12, where we can hold large events like that. So, but I think as far as Allison, what you were talking about, that would be covered under, you know, like the activities that we talked about last time, right?
yeah, I
It
guess
says,
like I was listening to you talking, but I'm also just still looking at like canning and wool dyeing, and I'm not sure that those are non-agricultural. I could see how a wedding, a party, a festival could be non-agricultural. Like I can easily imagine that. Like I don't see how yoga is agricultural.
Yeah, I think to your point, what you have in there for the examples under small venues may not be appropriate because those could be considered agricultural. And it may be more appropriate to pick other small non-agricultural types of uses, yoga, karate studio, you know, something in that idea, or, you know. But yeah, I definitely agree.
Is that okay with everyone? I've never even heard of farm karate.
Well, look at, I only say karate because I look at what Bob Burns you did over on his property on Shoeville, where he had the Aikido dojo.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Well played, Kevin.
Exact comment.
and Allison, these are recreational activities. So as long as nobody's having fun while they're canning, you're fine. That's the trick, right?
Can't have fun while you're canning.
Does anyone have fun while they're canning? Not in August. If we were to move on to new business, Mr. Woody, how much time, and Mr. Mogul, how much time would you need?
Yeah, I think we can do that because I mean it's a discussion and we get as far as we get, right?
All right. Well, I know I'm not supposed to bring it up, but I also want to leave enough time before all of us solar powered farmers start to crash. Next week, we need to discuss breweries. We need to discuss wineries. Mr. Muggle sent over a definition that was attached. Mr. Holmberg sent over a document as well. It was attached super late. So you'd have to read down, I'm not picking on you. It was. You'd have to re-download that to get the document that he had emailed over. Because again, we can't write anything in these meetings. We can only cross stuff out. And farm stores. And that's probably all we'll get through at the next meeting. And then we have one meeting left to go back through it all again, which is a lot. So I guess we'll wrap up that for tonight. Does anyone have any new business that they would like to discuss?
Yeah, Mr. Margo, I mean, do you want to talk about that first a little bit?
Well, hold on, let's do it properly. We
Fair
should
enough.
have somebody to make a motion to amend the agenda under new business.
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda under new business to discuss the Stonington Agricultural Historical District and master plan floating zones in general.
I will second the motion.
Okay. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I propose a agricultural heritage district as an opportunity for people in Ledyard to actually attempt to preserve their farms and farm buildings and to stimulate agricultural activity in what was called an agricultural heritage district. It is proposed to create a campus for agriculture, livestock, equestrian activities, education, and events. The areas proposed for an AHD or agricultural heritage district can be in any existing residential or commercial zone and encompass a minimum of 20 acres of contiguous land in one or more parcels under common ownership. That doesn't, they are common ownership. They don't have to be contiguous, but they are common. They are contiguous, excuse me, I apologize. Included within this minimum acreage shall be a farm or a portion of a farm that has been in operation at least 20 years. In other words, it's an established farm and is basically a productive farm. The town of Stonington currently has 3 farms utilizing its agricultural heritage district. These farms include Stonington Vineyards, Saltwater Farm Vineyard, and Dean's Mill Farm. The approved site plan for Dean's Mill Farm and section 7.24 of the Agricultural Heritage District from the Stonington zoning regulations are attached for your review and consideration. I thought it was very provocative and very interesting. So in my opinion, an agricultural heritage district would greatly help Ledyard's agricultural enterprises to compete for and enhance their survival, utilizing tourist dollars that are being left on the table that towns such as Stonington have been able to utilize. Now, Stonington's had this in operation since 2016. They only have 3 farms. The 3 farms are up and running. I've included a copy of the site plan.
Stone Acres Farm is a part of that district as well. There's at least, there are more.
Well, right now, these are the 3 that I've been able to identify, which is really great. I see that they are asserting themselves to preserve their farms in a pressure community such as Stonington, because development in Stonington, as you all know, is much more higher developed than we are. Also, tourism in Stonington is extraordinarily high. There is at the back of this document, a site plan review, or site plan application, and an approval from the town of Stonington, looking at the number of indoor and outdoor events, and then how many per month and this sort of thing. Just to give you a scope of activities that a quote unquote venue, agricultural venue would look at. In other words, this would allow people who have a larger scale event, a larger scale, and look at it as a venue, as well as a farm, as well as, in other words, it brings the 2 together. It melds both agricultural, not just through education, but education and activities. And they melds them together, yet preserving the farm with an income that is beyond the farming income. As we go forward, we'll become more and more competitive. And as you know, we sit between 2 casinos and just north of Mystic. And the very few of us bring any sort of agricultural tourism into town. This is something that we should really focus on if we really want to help agriculture in Ledyard. Otherwise, we're going to wind up being development, and that would be very bad, in my opinion. I'm sure there are others who would love to have it developed in a big way. But I frankly would like to keep my farm, which was started in 1744, a farm. And it was a cidery, it was a lot of things, a stagecoach, resting place, whatever. It has history, and that history needs to be brought forward.
Yeah, so I think, and we're talking about this, we have to talk a little bit about the sort of the technical zoning side of what that is, right? So what the Agricultural Heritage District is it is a master plan based floating zone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so what that means is, and hopefully Liz is still online, so if we have, she may be better at some of the technical parts here to help me out. So, but when we look at the town, right, we're all living in some sort of a zoning district, right? So most of us are in residential districts, and that district essentially specifies the uses that you're allowed on that parcel, as well as bulk requirements, setbacks, how much coverage you can have, that kind of thing. Okay. The idea behind a floating zone is that you have a zone that you can land, either anywhere in town, or that floating zone may have restrictions. So that floating zone can only be landed on parcels that are greater than 20 acres and, some other criteria. Then you can land that floating zone. Okay. In order to land that floating zone, you have to execute a zone change. Okay. So you have to come to the commission and get a zone change for that parcel. So in order to do a zone change, that means that the commission is acting legislatively. And so what that means is normally the commission acts administratively. So we get an application that comes in. Our job is to look at the regulations, look at the applications, and decide whether or not that application fits within the regulations. right? When we're doing a zone change, there are really no regulations that specify that. So we're acting legislatively, which means that we have the ability to either approve the zone change, we can deny the zone change, we can approve the zone change with modifications. The zoning commission has broad power during that zone change to kind of affect whatever changes that we want. And that's why the second part of that, which is the master plan part, comes into play. So the master plan is a document that accompanies the zone change, which essentially specifies what the zoning rules are going to be. So it specifies, this is what I'm going to do here. This is the list of uses that I'm going to have. It can even include signage plans. It can include all of those kind of things as part of that master plan. Okay. If the commission approves that, right, then the next thing that the applicant has to do is has to come in with a site plan. Okay. And that's what Mr. Margle sent along, is the applicant comes along with that site plan that must conform with the master plan that was included in the zone change. Okay. Once we approve that site plan, then they're in a place where they can actually move forward.
Go ahead. Except I also included there in 7.24 there, it's called the Agricultural Heritage District, which reflects their master plan quite effectively in terms of the details.
Yeah, and so if I can finish, no, it's no problem. And so, we do have, in the existing zoning regulations, we do have a master plan floating zone. It's for technology parks. Those are fairly common. You definitely see this type of master plan floating zone for big developments. Waterford has one for big box stores. And really, because what it lets you do is it lets you do phased development, so that you only have to do the technical site plan engineering for a building that you're about to build. And so the reason that the zoning commission hasn't gone after this type of regulation is because the energy barrier in order to land one of these is pretty high. So it gives you a ton of flexibility. So it really lets you do a lot of flexible things on a parcel. But in order to get sort of one of these approved and in place, it's a fairly involved process. And so, but it does allow a ton of flexibility to do this type of thing.
And it also allows farms to expand, and not just vineyards. Okay, I'm talking more of any kind of farm. It doesn't matter. As long as you're a farm and you've been there for 20 years, then you go on and then expand to a venue. And then again, you're right, it is a lot of work. It is several steps in the process. You're right, it is, but is it worth it for the long run? I mean, how long are we going to keep farms going in Ledyard?
Well, the thing I think to remember is that, right, as your example, if you want to hold large venues, right, the proposal essentially says that you need to do that through a special permit, right? And so of this type of regulation, if the goal is to become a large event venue, right, this isn't the way to do it, right? Because right now you just have to do a special permit, right, which is significantly less onerous than this is. But when you've got something where you really want phased development, so you've got 80 acres and you want to put a venue here and some other type of venue in another place and a third one in another place, it really lets you do that sort of phased development. Otherwise, it's really onerous.
Try to merge farming along with the event, and not try to do just a large event menu. We're trying to keep the farm as a farm and keep it surviving, because I think in the future things are going to change tremendously here. It's, as we know, Connecticut is not the least expensive place to be. It's extraordinarily getting much more expensive as we go. And yes, there are SPA 490 and all this other stuff going on here, but that may go who knows where and how. That would be still in existence. Again, go ahead. Excuse me. Go ahead.
I think Mr. Woody is just trying to say, and I have the same question, is like, how many farms would benefit from the development of a district like this in town? From my recollection, these regulations were adopted in Stonington when Stone Acres Farm was brought under a new board of directors, and they pushed to create the Heritage District because they knew that they wanted to open, a microbrewery, have a wedding space, have a restaurant, have the retail space. They wanted to be able to invite small scale artisan food producers to create lots of different things on their they had a really large vision for a really large diversity of things that they wanted to have on their farm, and it's my understanding that that's really what pushed the development of this floating zone. When I look at Ledyard and the number of parcels that meet that 20-acre 20-year-old requirement, that would be interested in doing a diverse number of activities that would really benefit from the creativity and openness of a floating zone like this, compared to just a farm that wants to have large events, or do maybe just one type of thing. Like, I'm not sure if it's worth it to go through what, again, I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about zoning, but it just seems like a pretty onerous process. To write these regulations, in my opinion, that falls outside of the scope of what the ad hoc committee is able to do in 2 more meetings. Like, I'm already feeling crunched for time.
I hear you.
And so I think that we could recommend this as a proposal if this is all that we agreed, but I don't think that we can take this on.
I'm
But
saying
also,
that,
I'm trying to imagine who would want to go through the effort to apply for this.
well, at the present time, there's only a few people that I know of that are interested in something like this. However, going forward, that may change. People will come here because the regs are such that they can do things here. In other words, you have this Mr. Valenti has just started. He's the most recent one, and he's a car dealer. And he just started a, what's it called here? Dean's Mill Farm. So that's quite interesting that they drew him, even though he is living in Stonington, they drew him into this area to do this sort of thing. In other words, your regulations can be an attraction or they can be an encumbrance. I would prefer to have us as an attraction. Moreover, there at present, that I understand when reading this, that there are at least 3 different floating zones in the Stonington area. In other words, there are 3 different districts, and they may be doing different things. They may not all be doing one same thing. I have to study it a little more to go after that. But this is something that in reviewing the regs and being part of this committee, review regs from everywhere, I have. And this is part of something I've came up with. This is the most provocative, attractive place to quote unquote farm, yet be part of the tourism culture that we live in. We live just north of Mystic, between 2 casinos. And every year we have 10 to 15 or 20,000 people a month coming into this area just to spend money here. How many of those people do we bring to our farms? Very few. That's a problem. Now, Stonington is more astute in that respect. And I'd like to see Ledyard also bring people in from other areas to spend money in Ledyard at your farm and my farm and Russell's farm and others, Parkinson's, for example. Anyway, I'll leave it there and that should be, I think it's a great proposal, but.
Yeah, and so, so look, zoning commissions love these, right? Because it gives the zoning commission a ton of power and control on things. And it really lets you do some interesting, flexible things. For me, so first, to second what Allison said, yeah, if we want this is something that we have to outsource. This is not something that this group or the zoning commission, I don't think would be wise to try to write. These are really complicated regulations. The master plan floating zone that we have was written by an applicant attorney. And so, it isn't something that we can probably handle. If this committee wants to, include as part of an output, a recommendation that this is something that should be explored and we should figure out how this would apply to some properties in town, I think that's reasonable. But I think there's a really limited number of actors that can take advantage of this. And I think the other thing to take in mind is, what we're trying to attract. We've talked a lot about what we want to do is we want to encourage existing and new farms in town. And this is only something that can be accessed by a really well-funded or existing operator. This isn't something that a young person who's coming out and starting a farm can really access. And so it's really sort of a, do we want to sort of have that low energy barrier so we can try to get people into it, or is it trying to go after bigger operators? And so I think the two things kind of target different groups of people to some extent.
Well, isn't that good? We target more than one type of pocketbook. I mean, basically.
Yeah, didn't say it was. Didn't say it wasn't.
Cash dollars, but we can target both. Yeah,
I didn't say it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? This is Liz Burdick, because I'm listening and I haven't attended a lot of the meetings because of my surgery, but I mean, these regulations were written so that people could operate their farms, and Nate, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but also have large events, small events, medium events on it. So you would still be able to operate your farm and also have these events without, I agree, Nate, you spoke to the floating zone. It's a long process. It is, I believe Mr. Valenti that you mentioned, Mr. Mogul, actually lives on that property. I don't think that these regulations prevent you from farming. They just they allow you to add uses such as large events, such as weddings, such as other events or other similar events. So I think that was the intent when they were written by this commission. Do you agree, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways they both allow
Right.
these sort of things, and certainly nothing in the proposal that we've discussed previously says that if you become a large event venue, you're no longer a farm. It's the exact opposite, right? It's defined as an accessory use to the farm. So you're allowed to become a large event because you are a farm, not in spite of.
Correct. That was the point I was trying to get across was the regs were written so that farmers could, have weddings are typically classified in zoning as commercial events. So this would allow a farmer to have commercial events on his beautiful farm. And that was sort of what the intent was when the regulation was put together. But so I just wanted to say that there's nothing to stop you from farming. It doesn't make your farm go away. It's just another way advantage of your farm.
Well, it just seemed to me, thank you very much for that. It seemed to me that I think the regs that are already in place in Stonington could be adapted to our needs here in Ledyard. They exist, they're there. They're certainly open to discuss them, and they're open to go back and forth with us on them. I don't think we need to outsource this at all. I think we could basically copy and paste them and then look at the primary. I mean, goodness sakes, why does it have to be so complicated? We'd certainly start that way and present a floating zone or a agricultural heritage district as something that, okay, we copy and paste it from Stonington as a starting place and then modify that. Now, I'm not trying to add to the work of the ad hoc committee, but this is something that can be done on a week. I mean, it's not that big a deal. So if that's as far as it goes, okay, that's probably a beginning point, not the end point.
There's nothing to stop a private property owner with a vision such as the agricultural heritage district from hiring an attorney and coming to the commission with that text amendment to add that floating zone to the regulation. So, I mean, certainly if there was a couple of farmers that really wanted to pursue this vision, as just with the technology park district, someone hired Attorney Sweeney, and Attorney Sweeney crafted the regulation and brought it forth as an applicant. It was not a commission application, but it certainly could be brought forth by any private parties that are interested in going this direction. So just wanted to throw that out there. It's not something the commission wouldn't consider, because if it was an application, they would consider it.
Any other thoughts?
I'm gonna go along with you, Angela. I think this falls outside the purview of what we were asked to go do.
Yeah, it's not that I don't like the idea. I'm not sure this is the time or place for it. But like, I don't say that as like I'm the head honcho when I'm saying that. I mean, if the group feels differently, then I'm happy to go along with whatever. I'm just lacking a little bit of enthusiasm because I'm not sure the scope is wide enough to have high enough value to be worth the effort compared to the other regulations that we've been working on, which I can see being utilized by a large number of farms in town.
I learned a lot. That was a lot of information. Thanks to Paul, thanks to Nate. And I can't really offer an opinion one way or the other. I don't think it would hurt to have it sitting there in the regs. I don't know that I'm going to be hiring Bill Sweeney to put it forward, because there's a lot of cost incurred with that for sure. But I mean, we could take advantage of it, but if we have this other set of regs, we could probably just as easily do that. But I'm really, really encouraged to see agreement or some sort of working with Mr. Woody and Mr. Mogul. And if there's anything I can do to foster that, it seems to be, there seems to be some sort of something congealing there. Boy, I'd just love to see that move in a productive direction. So I can kind of help out whichever way I can, but boy, there's a lot there. Holy smokes. At first glance, I was like, oh, this is a perfect fit. And now I'm a little overwhelmed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the adaptation of this to make sure that it doesn't conflict with other parts of our existing regulations, that's the work and that's the job. And that's why, certainly, we would require technical staff to make sure that we don't do that. It's not because this isn't a nice way of doing things. Master plan floating zones are a nice way of doing things. It's really just, they're technical enough. It's really easy to blow your foot off with this stuff. And I don't want to see that happen. But, actually, exactly what Liz said, if someone else brought, this as an application to the zoning commission and they'd already done that work of making sure that it works with our regulations, I have little doubt that the commission would be interested in that application.
All right. I think we'll just wrap it up for the night then, unless someone wants to make a motion to put together a proposal.
I don't know if I'm going to put the whole thing together, but I'm certainly going to look at it a little more in depth to see which way I can go with it. Again, I need to know the conflicts of what the issues are and where the landmines are. If Mr. Woody would be so kind as to say, hey, Paul, these are the 10 landmines that I see off the top of my head. Don't step on them. That would be helpful. And I appreciate his assistance. I'll leave it there. And if I hear from him, that'd be great. If not, I'll just muddle through and see what we come up with. But I'm not committing to say I'm going to finish this in time to the end of the next 2 months, but I'm going to work on it. And I think it has an ideal to approach a heritage district or agriculture in the Ledyard. We're 40 square miles. We have thousands of acres in agriculture here. Let's see what we can do with it and keep it in agriculture rather than in development. Not that I'm against development, but I'd like to see, look at the Holmbergs, multi-generational. That's really cool. I'd like, that's very nice. It's unique about the Ledger. That's why I like Ledger. But cheers.
But, and Paul, and so what I'm going to clarify is that while I don't disagree with what you're trying to propose here, I still think that this falls outside the purview of this commission.
I agree, it does, but
And for you to go and say that you're gonna go and not know if you're gonna do it, even if you do something in the next 2 months, I don't think that this body would put it forward to the zoning commission for consideration. That's, I think,
why not?
once again, like I said, it's outside the direction of the town council. It's outside the direction of what our,
It wouldn't fit the majority of farms in town. And I
Right.
think what we need most immediately are regulations that work for the majority. I feel like that's part of the project that we were assigned.
But Paul, that could kind of be good news for you because you can kind of go off on your own and be on a parallel track, you know. I know. But I think that's what I heard is like, hey, you can work on this on your own outside of this committee and come up with a solution possibly on your, you know, on your own outside the body. I could be wrong about that, but that was my understanding. It would be a parallel track.
Yeah, I know there's many parallels in life, and that's quite a challenge. Again, Mr. Woody, if you'd be so kind as to point out the landmines, that'd be helpful. I'd appreciate it if you could.
I will do my best. I will admit that I am slammed at work right now. I promising to get that to you in the next couple of weeks is probably not something that's going to happen. But you know, I do think it's interesting, and I have no problem talking, you know, with you about this offline anytime. I think they're interesting, and I think they can be very interesting. You know, especially outside of the timeline that we're kind of on with this committee.
Okay, bearing in mind that I did submit a definition for wineries, but that's for next week, I guess, or next time.
Yeah, I'd like for someone to make a motion to wrap up tonight because it's dark.
Yeah.
That's when farmers fall asleep.
yeah, and I've been up since 3 o'clock. So I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And then we'll adjourn the meeting at 8:02 p.m. And I, you know, that's not to gloss over your comment, Paul, because I did mention that your winery definition was attached. So everyone has that.
Thank you.
And we'll get all future submittments more than 24 hours before the next meeting, right?
Please.
Russell?
We hear you.
24 hours. I read minutes. 24 minutes.
Is it 24 minutes? I'm not sure. Yeah.
If you could just submit them tomorrow, then we'll have all month to review them. That would be ideal for everyone's late spring farm work schedules. So,
Yes, that's true.
all right. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.